The bunker door groans open, and 3 alien delegates step inside, their long fingers raised in the universal sign of surrender. I did not expect to see this day. Not after everything we lost. Not after everything we became. My name is Daniel Ashworth, and I am the only human they trust to translate their words into something my own people will understand. I did not choose this role. It chose me. The night I stood in a field outside Bristol and watched a wolf that used to be a lab experiment tear through an alien patrol like paper. That was 3 years ago. 3 years since the ships came, blotting out the sky with hulls the size of mountains. 3 years since a voice broadcast across every frequency on the planet, calm and almost bored, telling us to kneel. We did not kneel. The delegates in front of me now are trembling. Their leader, a tall being named Vorax, speaks through a translator device strapped to his throat. His voice is steady, but his hands are not. "We come seeking terms," he says. "Mercy, as your species defines it. We are prepared to withdraw." I almost laugh, almost. But I remember the first months too clearly to find any humor in this moment. When they arrived, they expected what they always expected. Every world they had touched before ours had folded within days. Their scouts had studied us for years, watching our wars, our politics, our divided nations. They concluded we were fragile, predictable, easy. They were wrong about one thing. They studied our governments. They never studied our forests. The first strikes hit our capitals. Not to destroy them, but to frighten us into obedience. Cities went dark. Power grids failed. Vorax people expected surrender broadcasts within a week. Instead, something stranger happened. Farmers stopped farming. Scientists stopped publishing. Every research lab that had ever worked on genetics, on animal behavior, on ecosystem engineering, suddenly had a single purpose. We had spent decades building tools to protect endangered species, to restore dying habitats, to understand the minds of predators. Overnight, those tools became something else entirely. I was a field biologist before the war. I studied wolf packs in the Scottish Highlands, part of a project meant to rebuild population numbers after decades of decline. When the ships came, my research station received a message from the new emergency council. It was short. It said they needed handlers, people who understood animals better than they understood people. I said yes before I finished reading the message. Within a month, our packs were no longer wild animals surviving on instinct alone. They carried modified biology, faster reflexes, sharper senses, a resistance to the strange energy weapons the aliens carried. We did not create monsters. We gave nature the tools to defend itself, and nature accepted the offer without hesitation. The first time I saw them move against an alien patrol, I understood why the invaders had never encountered anything like Earth before. Their scouts had visited hundreds of worlds. Most had cities. Most had governments. Most had populations they could isolate and control. None of those worlds had a Scottish Highland ecosystem behind every hill, waiting. Vorax still remembers that night, I think. I can see it in the way his eyes shift when he speaks. His patrol had been securing a supply route near Inverness. 30 soldiers, advanced armor, weapons capable of leveling buildings. They never made it out of the valley. I was not there to see the engagement itself, only the aftermath, and even that was more than enough. What struck me most was the silence afterward. No triumphant Earth army marching forward. No parade, just the forest, quiet again, as if it had simply done what forests do when something threatens the balance. The invaders adjusted their strategy. They brought heavier armor, better scanning technology, drones capable of detecting movement from miles away. It worked, for a while, against conventional resistance. Soldiers with rifles, small militias hiding in basements. It did not work against ecosystems. A river in the Amazon carried something new that summer, something engineered by researchers who once spent their lives trying to save the very species now defending that river. Alien patrols who waded through those waters found their equipment failing within hours. corroded by biological agents designed specifically to interact with their hull composites. Nothing lethal in the way a bullet is lethal, just quietly, patiently disabling. Meanwhile, along the coastlines, deep-sea creatures that had barely been studied before the invasion began responding to modified signal patterns broadcast from hidden buoys. Whales, once symbols of gentle conservation efforts, began shadowing alien naval vessels with a persistence that unsettled even their most experienced captains. I heard stories, secondhand of course, of ships turning back rather than face waters that no longer felt empty. Vorax coalition tried something else. They attempted negotiations with individual human governments, hoping to divide us the way they had divided other worlds. But something had changed in us collectively. There was no single leader to bribe, no single city to threaten, that would make the rest of us kneel. We had spent centuries arguing among ourselves about nearly everything. Yet somehow, when it mattered, we moved as one. Every laboratory, every wildlife reserve, every research vessel became part of something larger than any single nation. I remember the day the Emergency Council announced the formation of what they called Beast Divisions, though the name felt clumsy even then. It was less a military branch and more an acknowledgement of what had already been happening across the world. Handlers like me were given resources, coordination support, and a single directive: protect our regions using every tool nature and science combined could offer. I worked alongside a woman named Eleanor Whitfield, a geneticist who had spent her career trying to prevent the extinction of birds of prey. Under her guidance, hawks and falcons across the country developed abilities that let them track alien communication signals from the sky, guiding ground teams toward vulnerable outposts. She never once described her work as weaponizing nature. She always said she was simply teaching it to defend itself. The invaders began losing ground, not because our tanks outmatched theirs, or our soldiers outnumbered their forces, but because they could not predict us. Every region responded differently, shaped by geography and creatures they had never accounted for. Deserts brought heat-adapted predators that could survive conditions no alien armor was designed for. Mountain ranges brought creatures that used terrain no map in their databases accurately reflected. Even insects, tiny and easily dismissed at first, disrupted alien supply lines by targeting components their engineers never expected to be vulnerable. Vorax, still speaking now in this quiet bunker, admits something that surprises me. "We believed your species would fracture," he says. "We believed your reliance on individual nations would make coordination impossible." I nod, because he is right. What none of them understood was that humanity's real strength was never its governments. It was our stubborn refusal to separate ourselves from the natural world we came from. Every handler, every scientist, every farmer who suddenly found themselves guiding modified wildlife against an invading force, we all shared something the aliens never accounted for. We were never just fighting for territory. We were fighting alongside every living thing that called this planet home. By the second year, Alien Command began losing patrols faster than they could replace them. Entire regions became what their reports likely called unstable zones, though from where I stood, it looked more like balance restoring itself. I watched packs of engineered wolves work alongside human teams, with a coordination that felt almost effortless, as though the boundary between species had quietly dissolved under pressure. There were losses, of course. Handlers who never came home. Creatures who gave everything defending land that once belonged solely to them before ships from beyond our sky decided otherwise. I lost people I cared about during those years, and I carry their names quietly, the way I imagine every survivor of this war does. But the invaders lost something too. Not just soldiers or equipment. They lost certainty. Their entire strategy depended on studying a species, predicting its behavior, and controlling its response. They had never faced a world where the species they studied refused to separate itself from everything else living on that world. Now Vorax stands before me, asking for the mercy his own strategists once assumed they would offer us. I think about what mercy actually means in this moment. Not punishment, not revenge, just an honest reflection of what we became to survive. There will be no invasion left standing to negotiate territory, I tell him, keeping my voice steady, the way Eleanor once taught me to speak to frightened animals. Your fleets will withdraw. Every outpost still active will be vacated within the time given by the Council, and every creature currently holding ground will remain there until confirmation reaches every command post. Vorax translator hums quietly as it processes my words. And if we comply fully, then Earth remains exactly what it has always been, I answer, a world that defends itself. He studies me for a long moment, and something shifts in his expression, somewhere between understanding and quiet respect. We came expecting weakness, he finally says. We found something we cannot categorize. I almost tell him the truth, that we never saw ourselves as strong either, not before this began. We were simply a species that never separated itself from the world it belonged to. When threatened, we did not build higher walls. We opened them and let the world walk through beside us. The delegates leave the bunker, escorted by 2 soldiers, and a hawk perched calmly on Eleanor's shoulder, watching their every step with sharp, patient eyes. I remain behind for a moment, alone with my thoughts, listening to birds outside the bunker calling to each other, the way they always have, indifferent to empires or invasions, simply continuing the quiet rhythm of a planet that was never as fragile as anyone assumed. Vorax people wanted mercy from humanity. What they received instead was an honest introduction to the world they tried to conquer, a world that never stopped being wild, no matter how advanced the visitors from beyond our sky believed themselves to be. And as I step outside into the morning light, watching wolves rest quietly beside soldiers who once feared them, I understand something clearly, for the first time since this war began. We did not win because we became something new. We won because we finally remembered what we always were.